You felt it before. The ache between what you desire and what reality claims is true. That strange, holy tension between what your heart knows and what your senses report. It's the whisper that stirs beneath appearances, the echo of a deeper law. And as that quiet ache stretches across the veil of your being, something in you dares to ask, what if it's not the world that speaks truth, but the vision you carry within? Most wait for evidence before they believe. But you are not like most. You are beginning to remember. To believe when there is no sign is to believe as God believes, calling things that are not seen as though they were, and knowing they shall appear. That is the mark of the awakened soul. That is the law written not in ink, but in silence, etched deep into the very structure of consciousness itself. Reason stands like a sentinel, declaring what is possible based on the past. But imagination, that holy rebel, speaks from the end. Where reason demands proof, imagination offers a promise. Not a promise made, but a promise remembered. You do not need to convince the world. You only need to fall asleep in the feeling of the wish fulfilled. For what you accept inwardly becomes the law of your being, and the world bends to reflect it. This is not fantasy. This is the secret Christ revealed in parable and mystery. What things soever ye desire, when ye pray, believe that ye receive them, and ye shall have them. Mark 11:24. But there's a reason few ever experience this directly. They wait for confirmation before surrendering into belief. They want the bridge to appear before they take the step. Yet the step is the bridge, and the feeling is the fact. You are not separate from what you seek. There is no journey, only awakening. The delay is never in manifestation, it is in recognition, in your refusal to accept the invisible as the only substance. But as you release your grip on appearances and enter the stillness of assumption, something ancient stirs, a knowing, a gentle command that says, be still and know that I am God. You have been taught to measure reality by what can be touched, seen, explained. But that was never your true inheritance. You are not a victim of facts, but the cause behind them. Every shadow, every echo in your world, is but the outer garment of a deeper conviction. Your assumptions harden into form, always. Notice what shifts in you as you hear this. Some part resists, trained by years of logic and loss. But deeper still, something opens. Like the petals of a flower, turning toward unseen light, your soul begins to remember its source. Not a God above, distant and delaying, but God within, dreaming creation through you. To believe when reason denies it is not a test of effort. It is the release of effort. It is the art of becoming still enough to hear what the silence has always whispered. You do not force belief. You yield to it. You let the end become your dwelling place, and make no allowance for contradiction. When you live in the end, everything unlike it begins to fall away. Not through struggle, but through the simple law of agreement. You only ever experience what you inwardly consent to, and consent is not made by words, but by feeling. Feel it now, the reality of what you desire, not as a hope, but as a fact. Let it wrap around you like a warm garment. Let it breathe through your being like morning light entering a darkened room. There is no need to make it happen. You have already received it in imagination, and what is received there is received everywhere, though time may stretch the unfolding. This brings us to what most never realize. The moment you stop searching for signs, and begin dwelling in the unseen, the veil thins. The illusion of separation loosens its grip, and what once felt distant, impossible, unreachable, begins to shimmer with familiarity, like a dream you forgot you were dreaming. The mind may still protest, but the inner sanctuary, the dwelling place of assumption, knows it already is. Belief is not a matter of logic. It is not earned by argument or strengthened by proof. Belief is a state of being. You do not believe towards something, you believe from it. You do not look for the evidence of what is to come. You embody the reality that already is. The secret is not in waiting for it to happen. The secret is in knowing that it already has. And this is where the mind, loyal to its patterns, begins to struggle. It calls out, but look around. Nothing has changed. Yet you begin to see this cry for what it is. The last murmur of the old man, the echo of a consciousness rooted in appearances. It is not the voice of truth, but of memory. And you are no longer a prisoner of memory. You are not here to observe reality. You are here to create it, not by effort, but by consent. Not through action, but through alignment. You are the operant power, not the echo, but the origin. And what you accept as true in the stillness of your inner world, must take shape in the echoing chambers of the outer. This is the divine law hidden beneath all appearances. The world mirrors your state of consciousness. It reflects not what you want, but what you are. And what you are is defined by what you consent to inwardly. Every assumption, every silent inner claim, every feeling of this is so. These are the seeds of tomorrow's form. Most live as wanderers in their own creation, mistaking the echo for the cause. But you are remembering. You are learning to walk by faith, and not by sight, not as blind hope, but as divine certainty. You see beyond the veil of matter into the luminous realm of the unseen. You understand that the invisible is the root, and the visible is the shadow. So you withdraw your attention from the visible, not in rejection, but in reverence. You turn within, not to escape, but to align. And as you do, you feel the stirrings of something ancient and holy. A soft, steady awareness that knows you are already one with what you desire. You begin to embody it, not to try, not to make it happen, but to simply rest in its truth. You sit in silence and see with the inner eye. You walk through the world wearing the feeling of the wish fulfilled as your secret name, your hidden fragrance, your living prayer. It no longer matters what things look like. The seed is planted, and its unfolding is inevitable. You learn to treasure the delay, not fear it. For delay is not denial, it is gestation. It is the deep sacred unfolding of form beneath the surface. You do not dig up the seed to check if it is growing. You water it with faith. You bless it with silence. You remain faithful to the end you have seen, and the world obeys. Let the evidence contradict. Let the world say no. Let reason cry out that it is impossible. You need none of it. For the law is faithful, and the law is always fulfilled, according to your assumption. Can you feel the stillness beneath those words? That quiet recognition that you've known this all along. That every time you felt the impossibility of your desire, it was not the voice of failure, but the opportunity for faith. The sacred invitation to stand unmoved, even when the facts shout otherwise. And so you begin to walk differently, speak differently, not because something has happened, but because something is. You have shifted, you have assumed, you have taken possession in the only place that matters, the inner temple, and now the outer must follow, as it always does, not by force, not by demand, but by law. But what if even this, the act of assuming, is not the origin? What if it points to something even deeper, something buried beneath the assumption itself? Because beneath every assumption lies identity, and identity is the root from which all imagination springs. You assume not to convince yourself of something foreign, but to return to what is already true in a deeper realm. The feeling of the wish fulfilled is not a trick of the mind, it is a remembering of your rightful name. You are not the one trying to manifest, you are the one who already is. The assumption is simply the outer garment of that knowing, the language of belief speaking through sensation. And so the invitation becomes softer now, not to strain toward a vision, but to rest as the one who has already received. This is why belief, when pure, feels effortless. It does not argue, it does not seek confirmation, it breathes with the rhythm of stillness. It knows that to see within is to see fully, that nothing needs to move in the outer, until everything has settled within. The kingdom does not come by observation, it is within you. You do not imagine to get, you imagine to be, and in being, all things are drawn to you, by a law older than stars. What you radiate, you attract, not as magnetism, but as divine reflection. Consciousness outpictures itself in every scene, every conversation, every so-called coincidence. You are not moving through reality, reality is moving through you. So ask not, how will it come, but rather who am I in its presence? Let that question guide you gently back to the core, not to behavior, not to technique, but to being. Let your breath slow, your awareness expand. Feel yourself clothed in the identity of fulfillment, not as fantasy, not as hope, but as the most natural expression of who you are. You are not pretending, you are not playing a part, you are revealing your true inheritance, and in doing so, all that contradicts it begins to dissolve. Old thoughts, old patterns, old mirrors, they fall away, not because you fight them, but because they no longer recognize you. You have changed your name, you have moved into a higher dwelling, and the former house has no power over you. It is written, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. But thinking here is not mental chatter, it is the silent assumption of identity. It is the felt truth that runs deeper than language. It is the mood you wear without effort, the atmosphere of your soul. And so when you say, I am, what follows is not just description, it is creation. Every I am is a doorway. Every I am is a seed. And what you plant in those sacred moments will surely become flesh, not someday, not if, but as law, as certainty, as echo follows sound. The form will follow the feeling. Notice now the subtle shift within, a soft quietness, a gentle yielding. You no longer chase your desire like something distant. You rest in it. You let it rise from within, like a memory from a dream you've only just begun to recall. You let the feeling settle into your bones, like a name etched on your soul, long before time began. There is no need to prove, no need to explain, no need to persuade anyone, not even yourself. You simply are. And in that being, the universe reorders itself. What seemed far becomes near. What seemed unlikely becomes inevitable, because nothing stands between you and what you assume, except the belief that there is distance. Feel the veil thinning now, that old habit of doubt losing its voice, that past version of you dissolving into light. You are not becoming worthy. You are remembering you always were. The seed was never lost. The pattern was always within you. And now with every breath, you are stepping more fully into that unseen truth. But what happens when the outer world begins to contradict your new identity? When the old reflection resists the new face you've chosen? When the world you once knew begins to resist the truth you now claim? That is not failure, it is confirmation. For resistance is the old garment unraveling at the seams, unable to hold the new wine of your assumption. The outer world is not your enemy, it is your echo. And when echoes distort, it is only to reveal where you have not yet fully rested in your new name. This is the moment when most turn back. They see the evidence contradict their desire, and believe they've failed. But you are beginning to see the deeper rhythm. You do not judge by appearances. You do not return to the old self, because the mirror has not yet caught up. You remain, unmoved, still, faithful to the inner conviction. Imagine a lantern in the night. At first its light touches only what is near. But as it continues to burn, the darkness retreats, inch by inch, until the whole space is illumined. So it is with assumption. It begins as a small flame, warm, quiet, unseen, and then as you dwell in it without needing validation, the world reshapes itself to match your inner flame. You do not fight the old reflection. You do not explain your change to those who only knew your former self. You bless them with silence. You bless the contradiction with patience, and you keep walking as the one who already is. For the former things are passing away, not by force but by law. Feel the peace in that, the release, the inner rest that knows nothing real can be threatened, and nothing unreal can remain. You are not sustaining a fantasy. You are aligning with truth, and truth does not need defense. It only asks to be lived. So when contradiction arises, you let it pass through you, like wind through open hands. You do not cling. You do not doubt. You return gently to the end you've chosen. You close your eyes and feel it again, the reality that already lives in you. You return to the inner dwelling, the secret place of the Most High, where no storm can touch you. There is a sacred courage in this stillness, not loud, not dramatic, but unwavering. The courage of faith, the courage to stand in what feels real, long before it looks real. The courage to say I am, even when the world says you are not. You have stepped into the narrow gate, and though few find it, it leads to life. Life not measured in circumstances, but in union, in peace, in fulfillment that flows not from what happens, but from who you know yourself to be. All things begin and end in the invisible. The visible is the shadow, the echo, the fruit, but the seed is always within. You have planted it with your assumption. Water it now with trust, with joy, with rest. Do not ask how it will bloom. That is not your part. Your only task is to live in the knowing that it already has. You do not need to see the tree to know the seed is alive. You feel it, you trust it, and you let time do what it must, without leaning on it. Let the contradiction come, let it pass. It has no power here, for you dwell in a higher place now, and that place is not made of circumstance. It is made of truth, of awareness, of imagination clothed in love. Remain there, in stillness, in ease. Let every outer denial be met with a deeper yes, not spoken aloud, but whispered in the sanctuary of your heart. Yes, I am. Yes, it is done. Yes, I remember. And if the world grows louder, let your silence grow deeper. If doubt knocks, meet it with vision. If fear stirs, let it pass through the peace you've built. For your true home is not in the shifting sands, but in the rock of inner knowing. But what of the moments when you can't feel it, when the silence seems empty, and the vision feels far,
when the silence feels hollow, and the vision dim, that too is part of the unfolding, for there comes a sacred hush on the path, a seeming absence, where presence once burned bright. Do not fear it. This is not the loss of your power, it is the deepening of your roots. You are being drawn inward, beyond sensation, beyond surface feeling. It may seem as if nothing is happening, but this is the holy hour, the hour when your assumption sinks beneath thought, and becomes substance, when faith no longer needs to feel, because it is. The garden grows in darkness, the seed splits in silence, and what feels like stillness is sacred preparation. You are not abandoned, you are being established, made stable in the unseen, so that no storm can shake you. Most think faith must feel like light, warm, clear, comforting, but often faith feels like night, quiet, without evidence, without signs, and yet it is in that very emptiness that the soul is purified of needing proof. It learns to rest on truth alone. You are not waiting for the feeling to return, you are becoming the feeling itself. You do not need fireworks to know the flame is alive. You need only remember the end you claimed, the version of you who walks in the light of fulfillment. That one still exists, that one is still real, and as you remember, you realign. Let the silence be holy, let it soften you, let it wash away the need to control, to strive, to cling. Let it draw you deeper into surrender, not as defeat, but as devotion, for what you surrender to inwardly will rule your world outwardly. In this space, you begin to see more clearly what belief truly is, not performance, not intensity, but identity, a simple quiet knowing, I am the one who already has. Even when you feel nothing, that statement still stands. Even when the world feels frozen, the law still moves. You don't need to force yourself into emotion, that would only tighten your grip. Instead, release, relax, let go of the need to feel convinced, and choose to rest in the assumption regardless. Faith is not the absence of doubt, it is the refusal to build a home in it. And so in the days when the feeling is faint, walk anyway. In the moments when the vision dims, remember anyway. In the space where the echo seems delayed, give thanks anyway. Gratitude in the silence is the purest kind, for it proves you believe without needing to see. This is where you learn to live in the end, not just when it's easy, but when it's quiet, when the world doesn't applaud your inner work, when nothing seems to change, yet within, you stand firm, gentle, unmoved. The Israelites wandered in the wilderness, but the promise was never revoked. The vision does not vanish simply because the path feels long. Every assumption you have planted is alive, even when invisible, especially when invisible, for the invisible is the only reality. So you speak softly to yourself now, not to convince, but to commune. It is done. I am. Thank you. These words are not incantations, they are acknowledgments, keys that unlock the door to the temple within. And as you rest there, something begins to shift, not always in noise or motion, but in still alignment. You begin to feel less reactive, less desperate, less grasping. The old need to prove begins to fall away, and in its place, peace. The kind of peace that passes understanding, the kind of peace that does not waver with the wind, the peace of knowing that reality is not out there, it is in here, and in here, it is already done. So breathe, be still, let the silence work on your behalf, let the law carry your word into form. It always does, always. But can you truly trust that even in the dark, the light has not left you, that even in absence something sacred is being born?
Because even in the silence, even in the void, where nothing seems to move, something eternal is unfolding. The womb of reality does not tremble when light is hidden, for the seed is gestating beneath the surface, untouched by the doubts that flicker above. This is where the soul learns its deepest trust, not in the brightness of vision, but in the quiet, unshakable truth that the word is already sent forth and shall not return void. You are not forgotten in this stillness. You are being reformed. What you once reached for is now reaching through you, not with thunder or signs, but with the gentle gravity of embodiment. The more you rest, the more it becomes you, not a future thing, not a distant hope, but the shape of your being now. You feel it subtly at first, like warmth beneath snow, like breath in the dark, and then it begins to rise. And as it rises, you begin to notice reality no longer argues with you. It simply reflects, slowly then all at once. Not always in grand gestures, but in patterns, in alignments, in the soft reordering of what once seemed fixed. Life rearranges itself around your new center, not by force, but by law. It was never the vision that lacked power. It was your wavering identification with it that delayed the unfolding. But now something has settled. You are no longer one who is trying to believe. You are the one who knows not because of outer signs, but because you have tasted the inner truth and found it sufficient. This knowing is not loud. It is not dramatic. It does not seek to convince. It simply is. And when the feeling of being it becomes natural, the law responds without hesitation. For life can only bring to you what you already are in consciousness, and you have become the living echo of your fulfilled desire. This is why detachment is not abandonment. It is acceptance. You release the craving because you have already received. You stop chasing evidence because you are evidence. The old self may still whisper of what's missing, but it no longer has your agreement. You have moved. You have died to who you were, and risen into who you now embody. Be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. That renewal is not an effort of will. It is the gentle return to the end you've chosen, over and over, until that end becomes so familiar, so real, that even the body begins to respond to it. Your tone changes, your eyes change, the atmosphere around you changes, because you have remembered your name, and that name is not the one given to you by circumstance. It is the one chosen in silence, whispered by the inner voice of I Am. It speaks not of effort, but of alignment, not of future, but of now. And every time you dwell in that name, reality bows to it. You no longer ask when, you no longer wonder how, you simply abide. You move through the world as one who knows the truth is already established. You touch nothing with grasping, you hold everything with peace, and that peace becomes the gate through which the new must enter. Feel the grace in that, the stillness, the joy. This is not pretending, this is not fantasy, this is the rhythm of the real, and it is accessible to you, not because you've earned it, but because you've remembered it. What you seek is not outside, it was never outside. It is clothed in the thoughts you dwell upon, the assumptions you refuse to leave, the quiet agreement you make in the night hours of the soul. And when you rise in the morning, clothed in that silent yes, the world begins to rise to meet you. But what of the times when the world still reflects the old self, when the echo returns distorted, and the outer seems untouched? Can even that be used for your becoming? Yes, even that is sacred. Even when the world returns a reflection of the old state, even when your outer scene contradicts the inner claim, you are not being tested. You are being shown what remains to be loved into alignment. The world, with all its appearances, is not your adversary. It is your revelation. You cannot be deceived by appearances, once you know they follow you. Not you, the name or the face, but the inner posture, the one who dares to dwell in the end. The scene you face now, no matter how far it feels from your desire, is the echo of yesterday's belief. And if it arrives distorted, you do not curse it, you bless it. For it tells you precisely what has been assumed, and now gives you the chance to revise. This is the mercy of the law. It brings forth what you are so that you may see it, own it and change it. Not by resistance, but by recognition. You do not argue with the reflection. You change the face that looks into it. And how do you change that face? By feeling the truth of what you have already become, even if the mirror still lags behind. You do not panic when the mirror shows delay. You do not beg it to change. You close your eyes, turn inward, and remember the only place where reality is truly made. You remember that your senses are not your masters. They are servants, following the orders of your inner conviction. What you persist in assuming, regardless of what appears, must eventually become form. And so when the outer contradicts the inner, you remain still. You do not ask what's gone wrong. You return home. You breathe. You listen again to the voice that called you from the beginning, the voice of I Am. That voice never raises itself in fear. It speaks with authority, with love, with certainty. My word shall not return unto me void. Isaiah 55:11. Let that word return to you now, not empty, but full of the feeling of already having, full of the stillness of fulfilled desire. You revise what you see by refusing to dwell in it. You revise it not with effort, but with gentle inward selection. You choose the end again. You move inward, into the scene where it already is, and you live there, not for a moment, but until it becomes natural. If the phone call doesn't come, you still hear it inwardly. If the door remains closed, you still walk through it within.
if the number doesn't change, you still feel abundance in your bones. That inner act is not imagination as fantasy. It is imagination as creation, the holy faculty through which the unseen becomes seen. So you see the unwanted seen, not as punishment, but as an unfinished echo, a former assumption waving goodbye. You bless it, you release it, and you choose again. Notice the power in that, the peace. You are never trapped, never bound, never stuck. The outer world cannot imprison you when you know who you are, and who you are is the operant power, the dreamer in the dream, the one whose inner speech shapes tomorrow's frame. Even now, you can feel that shift, a loosening, a remembering, that nothing is final, unless you call it so, that no fact has power, except the power you grant it, that every scene can be reauthored, with a single assumption, lovingly held and faithfully returned to. It's not about denying what is, it's about knowing what is now, is not what must be, and more than that, it's about knowing what already is. In imagination must soon become what is seen. So you revisit your wish, you hold it not as longing, but as fact. You rehearse the outcome, not in hope, but in gratitude. You allow yourself to dwell in the feeling of having received, and when the world delays, you smile, not in pride, but in peace, because you know the law cannot be broken. But what happens when you've assumed, and assumed again, and the silence stretches longer than expected? When the world does not yet rise to meet your vision, what then? What lives on the other side of waiting? What lives beyond waiting is the end of time. For to the one who lives in the end, time becomes irrelevant. You are no longer walking toward your desire, you are walking from it, and from that height, delay loses its power. It cannot frighten you, cannot tempt you back into doubt, because you have seen what is real, and refuse to look away. Waiting only exists when you believe something is yet to come, but the one who abides in fulfillment knows that nothing is coming, it has already arrived, clothed in the unseen. The senses may not yet agree, but they are not the source, they are slow reflections, and when you no longer need their permission to feel complete, the bridge of incidents unfolds, not by your command, but by law. The seed does not anxiously watch the soil, it rests in certainty, its growth is silent, unseen, inevitable. So too the assumption held without strain becomes law made visible. But the moment you look away from the end, you begin again, not because the law is punishing, but because the mirror can only reflect what is present. So you stay faithful, not with clenched fists or forced emotion, but with quiet embodiment. You become the one who no longer waits, because the waiting is done. The moment you claimed it in consciousness, it was finished. And from that moment, your only task is to remain, as one who knows. This knowing is not loud, it does not seek affirmation, it does not require constant reaffirmation, it is gentle, still, complete. The kind of knowing that can sleep in the storm, the kind that no longer questions if or how, but simply abides in I am. And yet the world may still appear unchanged. People may speak the old story, circumstances may echo the former assumption, but you do not flinch, you do not chase, you do not retreat. You walk through the scene with holy detachment, wearing the robe of fulfillment as your unseen garment. This is what it means to live in the end. You speak differently, not because you are trying, but because your words are flavored with arrival. You move with the quiet confidence of one who has already received. You do not explain, you do not seek validation. Your peace becomes the evidence, your stillness becomes the sign. And as you persist, not through effort, but through being, the outer must yield, the bridge must appear, the shapes must shift, the actors must take their new roles. You have written the script in silence, and life must now perform it. Do you see it now? The illusion of waiting was never real, it was only the mind measuring time. But spirit knows no delay. Spirit is, the moment you assume, the thing assumed is yours, and every appearance to the contrary is a fading echo of a state you no longer occupy. You are free, you are full, you are fulfilled, not someday, now, for consciousness is not bound by clocks, it moves in eternal now. And when you live from the end, you collapse the distance between desire and manifestation, not by forcing it into being, but by being it. So feel this now. Let the weight of effort melt away. Let the false need for evidence dissolve. Let the idea of waiting fall off you like old skin. Breathe into the truth. You already are, and let that truth carry you, like a river, effortlessly into the unfolding of what was always yours. There is nothing left to get, only something to accept. And in that sacred acceptance, in that yielding to what already is, a greater mystery begins to rise, one that does not simply bring things into your world, but transforms you into the likeness of what you once thought you needed to attain. And so the real question arises, not when it will come, but who are you now that it's already here? Because when you ask who you are, now that it's already here, something shifts beneath the surface. The question no longer looks toward the future, it draws the future inward. It says, I am not becoming, I am revealing, and in that revealing, the illusion of separation fades. You step out of waiting and into embodiment. To feel the wish fulfilled is to wear it as skin, to let it inform the tone of your voice, the pace of your breath, the way you sit in silence. No striving, no performing, just being. This is not a state you visit. It becomes your dwelling, your temple, your resting place. You no longer seek signs, because you are the sign. You no longer wonder what must shift, because you realize you are the cause of the shift. Every outer change is born from this invisible becoming, as within, so without. And as you walk the world in your new identity, it begins to mirror you, not in chaos, not in confusion, but in divine order. The law does not rush, it does not delay, it reflects perfectly, faithfully, with the still rhythm of eternity. You begin to see how the old self was always a shadow, a habit, not a truth. And each time you remain faithful to your new state, you dissolve another layer of that shadow, not through war, but through warmth, the warmth of silent conviction, the quiet fire of I am. And in that fire, the dross burns away, the need for others to approve, the habit of questioning, the desire to explain. You become less concerned with how it looks and more aware of how it feels, for the feeling is the secret, the invisible root from which all appearances bloom. Let that feeling rise now, not as a task, but as a remembrance. The you who has already received walks differently, thinks differently, breathes differently. Let that version of you move through your mind like water over stone. Let it soak into the corners of your being, until no part of you feels separate from what you have claimed. This is the sacred fusion, when the desire and the self merge, when the distance between longing and having dissolves into the stillness of fulfillment, when you stop reaching for the future, and realize that the end is not somewhere out there, it is alive within you. Now, it may seem subtle, it may seem too gentle to be powerful, but that stillness is the power. The deeper the silence, the more complete the alignment. And when you feel no urgency to make it happens, not because you forced it, but because you remembered it, you accepted it, you became it, according to your faith. Be it unto you, not according to struggle, not according to appearance, according to faith. Faith as identity, faith as being, faith as the silent agreement that this, here and now, is done. So who are you now that it's here? Let that answer fill your body. Let it change how you hold yourself, how you see the world, how you speak to yourself in the quiet. You are not rehearsing the state, you are being it. And every moment you remain there, the law moves, it must. You begin to notice that even the smallest acts, brushing your teeth, opening your door, walking down the street, carry the fragrance of fulfillment. There is no separation between the mundane and the miraculous. The miracle is in the being, and the being cannot help but draw its likeness into form. Do not ask what more you must do. Ask only, can I let this feeling be enough? Can I let it saturate me until I forget I ever longed for it? For the moment you forget it as a goal, and remember it as your nature, the bridge appears, not by effort, but by law. And still beneath all this, a deeper question begins to rise, one that turns the gaze away from things, outcomes, manifestations, and towards something more eternal, something that was never about what you get, but about who you've always been. Because when the outer forms fall into place, and the desire is fulfilled, something quiet begins to echo through the chambers of the soul. Was this ever really about the thing, or was it always about the awakening? You begin to see that the house, the lover, the healing, the wealth, these were never the true prize. They were symbols, mirrors, instruments used by the deeper current to call you back to remembrance. They were the shadows that led you to the light that was always within. And now, having touched the power that imagined them into being, you find yourself less enchanted with the forms, and more in love with the source, not as something separate or beyond you, but as you, the secret place of consciousness, the indwelling I am, that still small voice that whispered before the world was. This is the turning point, the sacred reversal, where you stop seeking creation as proof of power, and begin living from power itself, not to get, but to give, not to prove, but to express, not to fix the world, but to shine from within it. You are not here to manifest things, you are here to remember God, and God in you is imagination. Desire was only the voice calling you inward, assumption was the doorway, fulfillment was the unveiling, and now you begin to understand what was always true. The world was never outside you. Every face, every event, every mountain and valley, they were scenes projected from the film within. The law did not give you what you wanted, it gave you what you accepted, what you embodied, what you believed yourself to be, and that belief, that self-concept, was the true creation all along. Let this settle in your being, let the tension melt from your chest, from your brow, from the space between your thoughts. You have nothing to prove, you have no one to convince, you are already whole, already full, and from that fullness, you may choose anew, not from lack, not from craving, but from joy. Creation is not about need, it is the overflow of being, like stars pouring out of silence, like a tree bearing fruit, not because it strives, but because it is. This is why the highest assumption is not about having but about being, not I will get this thing, but I am this truth, not I am rich, for the sake of wealth, but I am abundance, and from that state, wealth must come, not I want love, but I am beloved, and all things draw near in response. You are not the seeker, you are the source, the dreamer in the dream, the cause behind every reflection, and the more you remember this, the more effortless it becomes to live in the end, for the end is not an event, it is a state, and the state is not far off, it is here when you breathe with quiet gratitude, it is here when you sit in stillness, and feel the nearness of what once felt far, it is here when you speak gently to yourself, not to change, but to cherish what you already are. Before Abraham was I am. Let that truth become the foundation beneath your every assumption. Let it cradle you in moments of doubt, and carry you in hours of silence. For when you live from I am, nothing is lacking, nothing is lost, and nothing is denied. And now, as you walk the world, not to get, but to give, you begin to notice something beautiful. Everything begins to respond to your presence, not because of what you have, but because of who you are. And who you are is remembered. But what does it look like to walk the world as the one who remembers, not occasionally, but continuously, even in the face of contradiction, even when all around you forget?
It looks like stillness in the midst of noise. It looks like peace when others panic. It looks like walking through contradiction without shrinking, because your inner eye is fixed not on what appears, but on what is. To remember continuously is not to recite mantras or strain, to feel a certain way. It is to become the vision so completely that the world cannot convince you otherwise. You carry the knowing in your breath, in your gaze, in the pauses between words. It becomes your atmosphere, your fragrance, your signature. And the world begins to respond, not always instantly, not always loudly, but undeniably. People soften, circumstances bend, doors open. But more than any of that, you remain unchanged, even when the scenery has not yet caught up. This is true mastery. When you no longer need reality to agree in order to believe. When you understand that your inner state is not up for negotiation, not dependent on what someone else says, not fragile in the face of delay. You are the one who is remembered, and in that remembrance, the world bows without needing to be asked. And when those around you forget, when they speak from the old script, when they reflect what no longer belongs to you, you do not react. You do not explain, you do not seek to convince, you bless them inwardly, and walk on, for they are only showing you what you no longer accept, and that too is a gift. You begin to see every moment as a mirror, not a mirror of judgment, but of clarity, a mirror that helps you refine your inner stance, not with tension, but with love. For every reflection that arises is an invitation. Will you remember who you are, or will you slip back into sleep? And again you choose to remember. Not through effort, through identity, through the soft repetition of I am, through the gentle yielding to the scene fulfilled within. You are not chasing, not begging, not hoping. You are dwelling in the secret place of the Most High, where no contradiction can enter. You speak with less, but mean more. You act with ease, not haste. You listen more deeply, not for answers, but for alignment. And life begins to feel less like a battle, more like a revealing. Every step, every conversation, every encounter becomes part of the unveiling. You are not reacting to the world is reacting to you. Ye shall know them by their fruits. The fruits of your state are all around you, not just in outcomes, but in atmosphere, in how you sleep at night, in the silence between moments, in the effortless unfolding of what once seemed hard-won. And when old patterns reappear, not to stay, but to be seen, you do not fear them, you thank them, for they are the evidence that you have moved. The contrast reminds you of your new center, and from that center, you revise, you return, you re-enter the state of the end, and rest there until the shadow fades. You no longer need the world to agree, because you know it must follow. You know the law is certain. You know that every assumption, when persisted in, hardens into fact, and so you become gentle, unshakable, like water that wears down stone, not by force, but by constant presence. And the more you remain, the easier it becomes, not because life has changed, but because you have. You are no longer waiting for change to feel complete. You are complete, and the change simply reflects it. But what happens when everything collapses at once? When the very thing you've assumed seems to unravel before your eyes? When the world appears to say no with finality? Can even that be held inside the silence of your knowing? Yes, even that can be held. Even when the ground falls away, and the scene collapses into what looks like final loss, something deeper remains untouched. That is the place you now dwell, the place that does not flinch, does not fear, does not reach outward for rescue. It is the place of the true self, the hidden man of the heart, where the word remains unbroken. Because when the world shouts no, and reason declares defeat, and everything once assumed begins to fade, the soul that remembers does not beg, nor panic, nor bargain. It returns, it turns inward, and gently repeats, this is still true, not by sight, but by law, not by feeling, but by essence. You do not chase the appearance, you hold the end, and in holding the end, you transcend the scene entirely. You were never creating from circumstances, you were never manifesting from evidence, you were drawing forth what already was in you, from a realm higher than thought, deeper than feeling, older than time. When things fall apart, it is only the remnants of the former self breaking loose, unable to hold their shape under the weight of your new identity. You are not being punished, you are being purified. Let that echo through you like sacred wind. You are not being tested to see if you're worthy. You are being refined until you remember you already are. And so the outer world may crumble, it may mock your assumption, it may wave the flag of contradiction, but you do not bow, you do not shrink, you do not trade your throne for proof. Instead you enter the silence more deeply. You anchor your gaze beyond what is seen. You walk with the stillness of those who know that nothing real can be threatened, and nothing imagined in God can be lost. Even when the facts scream no, you whisper yes. Even when all appearances deny it, you dwell in the feeling that it already is. Because assumption is not reaction, it is dominion, and you are not reacting to life anymore. You are originating it. This is the quiet authority of the one who lives in the end, the one who knows that scenes may change, but the state remains, that destruction can be a doorway, that endings are often thresholds, and if you lose something that once matched your desire, ask not why did this leave, but have I outgrown this form? For sometimes the old manifestation must dissolve, so the deeper fulfillment can take shape, one that is not built from striving, but from soul. You let the ashes fall, you do not cling to them, you rise instead into the state that calls forth new life. The resurrection always comes, not when you beg for it, but when you become the one who never left the tomb empty. I am the resurrection and the life. Let that become your breath. Let it carry you through every falling structure. Let it lift you when the world seems to say the dream is dead. For nothing is dead in God. It only sleeps, waiting for the word to be spoken again. And you are that word, spoken in flesh, dreamed into being, sent forth not to chase things, but to reveal truth through them. What you assume is not a strategy. It is a declaration of identity. And identity, when remembered, cannot be stolen,
cannot be lost, cannot be denied. So feel now the place in you that remains, steady, holy, immovable. Let it gather you in the storm. Let it remind you of what is yours, not because you forced it, but because you remembered. The state that drew it still lives. The feeling still breathes beneath the surface. And if you return, the form must rise. But what if you no longer crave the old form at all? What if the very nature of desire is transforming into something purer, vaster and far more eternal? Because when the old forms lose their grip on your longing, and the desires that once consumed you begin to soften, it is not emptiness that enters, it is expansion. Something deeper begins to stir, not of possession, but of presence. You are no longer driven by what you want. You are moved by what you are, and what you are is becoming more visible, more luminous, more free. You realize now, desire was never about acquisition. It was the soul's way of leading you home. It whispered through longing to bring you back to the self, until the self no longer needed to reach, only to radiate. The things were never the prize. You were the recognition of your own infinite nature. That was the treasure hidden in every longing. And when this shift occurs, a holy stillness settles over you, not because your world is finally in order, but because your being is. You are no longer tethered to outcomes. You are no longer defined by what shows up or doesn't. You've seen beyond the veil, and now you rest in what cannot be taken. You may still create, you may still assume, but it is no longer from hunger, it is from joy, no longer from lack, but from overflow. You do not need your assumptions to materialize in order to be fulfilled. You are fulfilled, and from that fulfillment, the world reflects beauty after beauty, none of which you cling to. This is the deeper mystery. When you no longer need the thing, it flows freely. When the desire has been transfigured into identity, all else becomes effortless. For the Lord does not serve the frantic, it serves the faithful, and faith at its highest is stillness. You assume now not to get, but to express, not to grasp, but to reveal. You become a vessel through which God speaks, not by might, but by imagination. The word becomes flesh, not because you force it, but because you consent to let it move through you. Delight thyself also in the Lord, and he shall give thee the desires of thine heart. The delight comes first, the resting, the rejoicing, the being, and from that delight, the whole creation responds, not as compensation, but as reflection. So let yourself be delighted again, not by what you hope to gain, but by what you have remembered, that you are not here to prove anything. You are here to express the fullness of God's image, which is imagination itself. And when you do, life becomes soft again, sacred, surprising. The old desires fall away like dried petals, and in their place, new ones rise, not rooted in craving, but in clarity. Desires born of vision, not fear. Desires that carry no urgency, because they are already fulfilled the moment they are felt. You taste them within and trust that the outer will arrive, not to complete you, but to echo you. And so you speak less, and imagine more. You stop asking and start knowing. You stop knocking and start dwelling. You become the very embodiment of the thing once longed for, and the longing dissolves into presence. You no longer care when or how, you simply abide, and in that abiding, the law continues its perfect work. Quiet, unseen, unstoppable. Feel that now, that freedom, that relief, the loosening of grasp, the soft exhale of a soul that has surrendered not in defeat, but in divine union. You are no longer waiting to receive. You are now the one who gives you. You give through being, through radiance, through identity remembered. And perhaps as you rest deeper into this new state, another mystery rises, not about what you desire, but about what has always desired you. What if the life you once dreamed of has been waiting patiently all along, for you to believe yourself worthy to live it? Because what if it was never your desire, chasing fulfillment, but fulfillment seeking you through desire? What if the dream was not something to attain, but something sent, an invitation from the deeper self to awaken into the life that has always belonged to you? A life not built by effort, but recognized through assumption. A life that has never been absent, only unseen. It is not about earning. It never was. You do not qualify for your vision. You remember it. You assume its form inwardly, and in doing so you awaken the pattern that has waited patiently within you. You stop striving. You start listening, and in that listening, you hear it. the still sacred call, all that I have is thine. That is the voice of your true inheritance, the voice that does not speak to your doubts, but to your identity. It does not ask you to prove, but to receive, to walk as the one already chosen, already complete. The dream is not trying to test your worth, it's trying to mirror your belief. So the question is no longer, how do I make this happen? The question becomes, am I willing to see myself as the one who already has it? Not someday, not if, but now, quietly, completely, inwardly. Feel that shift, how it draws you deeper, how it softens your chest, how it unhooks the claws of craving. You are not becoming, you are revealing. The truth has always lived within you, and desire was simply the map etched on your heart to lead you there. You do not need to chase your vision, you need only prepare a place for it within. Set the table in silence, light the lamp of assumption, and wait not with anxiety, but with expectancy, knowing the guest has already been summoned by your inner act. You live now in the end, not by pretending, but by embodying, not by repeating, but by feeling, the feeling of already being it, of already dwelling in that atmosphere. And in that dwelling, the outer form becomes inevitable, because it is not separate from you, it is born from you. Call unto me, and I will answer thee, and show thee great and mighty things, which thou knowest not. Let that call be silent, let it be your assumption, let it be the sacred act of saying inwardly, it is done. You do not call out in need, but in remembrance. You summon not a thing, but a self, and the self you summon, the one who already lives in the state desired, has no doubt, no delay, no desperation. They breathe differently, they rest without questioning, they see through eyes that have already seen the promised land, and now walk through time as its fulfillment unfolds. You do not need to persuade the world, you only need to align with the world already built within you. The kingdom is not coming, it has come, but only those who assume it see it, only those who wear its feeling walk its streets. So tonight, as the world quiets, and you return again to stillness, allow yourself to be clothed in that identity. No performance, no striving, just acceptance. You are the one who has already arrived, and the life that once felt distant is now the mirror of your quiet becoming. And as you rest in that truth, another question whispers from beyond the veil, not about the desire, but about the one who dreamt it. Who are you really? Beyond all forms and fulfillments, beyond even the assumption. When the dreamer awakens within the dream, when the dreamer awakens within the dream changes shape, not because the world has moved, but because the one beholding it has. The fabric of reality begins to shimmer, and what once felt fixed reveals itself as fluid, formed not by conditions, but by consciousness. You do not merely wake up to what you want, you wake up to who you are, and who you are is the one who imagined it all. You are not the character waiting for life to unfold. You are the author, writing from the end, speaking through the stage. The scenes, the faces, the conditions, they arise from you, not from your efforts, but from your assumptions. And those assumptions are not thoughts strung together, they are your sense of self, your state of being. It is here, in the stillness beyond desire, that you begin to taste true power. Not the power to get, but the power to know. The knowing that what you see is only the echo of what you have believed yourself to be. And in that knowing, you find something more precious than any outcome, union with the dreamer. There is no separation between the thing desired and the one who desires. There is only a veil, thin and trembling, drawn across your remembrance. But now, with eyes made new, you lift the veil. You remember that you have always been the cause, always the origin, always the divine center around which the outer world must revolve. This is not arrogance, it is the return of rightful identity. You are not here to worship creation, you are here to express the Creator, and the Creator moves through you, breathes through you, assumes through you. That sacred I am is not a phrase, it is the presence behind all form. And so you no longer ask, will I have what I desire? You ask instead, can I abide as the one who already holds it? Because that abiding is not make-believe, it is the axis of transformation. It is the place where the dream softens, and the real emerges, not as something new, but as something always there. Awake thou that sleepest, and arise from the dead, and Christ shall give thee light. This light does not flash from the heavens, it rises from within, quietly, steadily, as your awareness shifts from the character to the Creator. You are not a fragment, you are the fullness of God, dreaming yourself into form. Feel what that means, let it settle in your bones. The voice you once thought was imagination, was God. The visions that stirred in the quiet moments, were sacred blueprints. The feelings you rehearsed, were not wishes, but memories. And now, as you reclaim them, you reclaim yourself. This is the root of all assumption, not the technique, but the being, the quiet inner act of stepping into the I am that knows, and from that knowing, all things are added, not because you reached for them, but because they recognized you. You stop trying to convince the world, you stop trying to earn the prize, you become the place where the world conforms, gently, obediently, beautifully, to your invisible claim, and the more you live from this space, the softer everything becomes, the less you resist, the less you strive, the more you surrender, not in weakness, but in wisdom, for what you surrender to in imagination, you rule over in form, so you keep returning, not to the world, but to the center, the Holy of Holies, the quiet place where assumption is not effort, but ease, where creation is not will, but love, where identity is not constructed, but revealed, and just as the dreamer stirs, something else begins to rise, something not imagined, but eternal. What if the final realization is not what you can manifest, but that you are, and always have been, the manifested word itself?
Because once you glimpse that you are the Word made flesh, the veil tears quietly in two. Not in drama, but in deep recognition. The world around you does not change in that instant, but you do. And in your change, everything else must follow. You no longer live to become, to prove, or to convince. You live to be. Not the self you thought you were, shaped by memory and name, but the self that was spoken in the beginning, the one who simply is. You were not sent here to strive after light. You are the light. You are the breath of God, wrapped in imagination, clothed in experience, and now awakening again to your eternal nature. You are not separate from the law you practice. You are the law in motion, the principle incarnate, the seed, the soil, the blossom. This is why the law of assumption was always more than a technique. It was a doorway, a return, a remembering of your creative nature. You assume not to escape life, but to reveal the life you carry within. You assume because you are the one who calls things that are not seen as though they were, and knows they will be. And what is the word but your self-concept, made alive? That which you claim yourself to be, quietly, consistently, deeply, becomes flesh. It walks, it speaks, it surrounds you in form and function. Your world is the word you spoke in feeling. So when you say, I am, understand what follows, is not mere thought, it is creative decree. And what is decreed in the unseen, is law to the seen. You don't need to believe the outer will shift. You only need to believe you have shifted. The rest is the echo, and the echo cannot return empty. For the word goes out and fulfills what it was sent to do, not by chance, not by circumstance, but by covenant. And the covenant was always between the outer and the inner, between the world and the I am. Let this truth be your rest now. Let it loosen the need to force, to prove, to beg. There is no begging in God, only assuming, only knowing, only the stillness that comes from identity fully claimed. You do not wait for permission from the world. You do not wait for a sign. The only sign you need is the feeling within. The felt sense of it is done. That is the proof. That is the presence. That is the seed planted in the silence, destined to rise in perfect time. And when it rises, it will feel like home. Not surprise, not novelty, but recognition. The end you've been rehearsing inwardly will greet you like a familiar face, because it was always you. And when it comes, you will smile. Not because it's new, but because it matches the truth you've been walking with in secret. So rest in that, and ask yourself now, what am I assuming to be true of me? Not what do I want, but what do I believe myself to be? For the outer must become what the inner accepts without wavering. This is not theory, this is law, the law of being, the law of identity, the law of reflected self. Your assumptions do not create arbitrarily. They create according to what you believe you are worthy to express. And worthiness is not something earned, it is something accepted. It is not a reward, it is your nature. The moment you assume worth, the mirror shifts. The moment you dwell in your end, the world begins to walk toward it. But what happens when even the deepest assumptions feel quiet, still, untouched by emotion? Can assumption remain alive, even without feeling, even in the absence of signs? Can knowing hold its form, when the wind forgets your name? Yes, it can. In fact, it must. For the truest knowing is not loud. It does not roar. It does not rush, to be felt or understood. It is not born of emotion, though emotion may follow. It is still. It is quiet. It is the deep river beneath the current, unmoved by the winds above. You do not need to feel on fire every time you assume. The law does not measure your passion, it responds only to what you accept as natural. And what is natural does not require effort, it simply is. Just as you do not strive to believe the sky is above, or the earth beneath, you do not strain to hold the truth once it has settled into your bones. So if there comes a day when the assumption feels dull, when the feeling is faint, when you cannot stir the same passion as before, do not mistake that for failure. That is the season of rooting, of embodiment, where the seed has gone deep, and the soil above it appears unchanged. But beneath the silence, something eternal is preparing to rise. Emotion may come and go, circumstances may shift and sway, but assumption, when it has become identity, does not need to shout to be real. It rests, it breathes, it simply waits for its reflection to arrive. And even in that waiting, you are not truly waiting. You are living in the end. You are walking as if, speaking as if, breathing as if, not to perform, not to force, but because it is who you are now. This is the sacred place, when you have moved beyond needing to feel it all the time, when you no longer rely on intensity to believe, when you no longer use the outer world as your mirror, but live solely from the mirror within. You walk not by appearances, but by inner vision. You live not for confirmation, but from conviction. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Substance, not spark, evidence, not explanation. And this substance is not emotional, it is foundational. It is the structure of the invisible world, held in place by your persistence in assumption. So let the stillness be enough, let the quiet be holy, let the absence of feeling become the sign that feeling has been replaced by being. You are no longer trying to get into the state, you are the state. And now, your only task is to remain, unshaken, unhurried, unmoved by delay. When doubt whispers, you do not argue, you do not defend, you return. You recall, you reclothe yourself in the end. You say gently, I remember who I am, and you allow that remembrance to be your anchor, and it will carry you, through the valleys, through the silences, through the days when nothing moves, and the nights when nothing speaks. You will remain, because you no longer need to feel in order to believe. You believe because you know, and in that knowing, the outer world begins to soften, not because you demanded it, but because you no longer look to it. It comes quietly, as it always does. The bridge unfolds, step by step. The form arrives, not with fanfare, but with inevitability. You did not force it, you allowed it. And now, all things must rise to meet the one who has already assumed. But what if even this quiet mastery, this calm persistence, is only the beginning? What if assumption itself is merely the threshold to a state beyond wanting, beyond imagining, beyond even manifestation, into the full remembrance of divine union? Because beyond assumption, beyond even the perfect unfolding of form, there waits a deeper invitation, the remembrance of union, a place not marked by what you attract, but by what you are. It is not the end of desire, but the transfiguration of it, where longing melts into being, where you no longer feel the need to create, because the creator and the created have become one. This is not the loss of manifestation, it is its fulfillment. You no longer seek to demonstrate the law, you embody it. You no longer reach outward for signs of power, you rest in the knowing that you are the power in form. You are not just assuming states, you are the awareness from which all states arise. At this level, the world becomes transparent, not in the sense of fading away, but in the sense of no longer distracting you. You see through it. You walk among appearances, but your gaze is fixed on what is eternal. You are in the world, but no longer of it. Not because you withdraw, but because you are full. You are full of the knowledge that everything you once sought was already within you, not as potential, but as presence. The presence that spoke in the beginning, the presence that said, "Let there be," and saw that it was good. That same presence breathes now in your assumption, in your silence, in your still certainty. This is what it means to live from the divine center, to abide in the inner temple, and allow the outer to become what it must. It is not apathy, it is not detachment, it is the highest form of intimacy, for it trusts completely in the unseen. It does not monitor, it does not measure, it simply is. And in that is nice, everything flows. You become less concerned with the arrival of form, and more devoted to the fragrance of consciousness. You begin to love the feeling itself, the still, radiant knowing that you are what you once sought. You look at your world, not for evidence of fulfillment, but as a canvas to express the self that already knows it is fulfilled.
The miracles continue, the bridges appear, the forms take shape, but they are no longer your aim, they are your reflection, and the true reward is the peace you now carry, the joy that needs no cause, the freedom that cannot be shaken, even when the winds return. This is not abandonment of the law, it is union with the source of the law. It is the point where assumption and identity dissolve into something greater, awareness itself, pure, whole, eternal. You begin to live more in silence, not from passivity, but from reverence. Every thought becomes sacred, every word becomes a seed, every moment becomes a holy mirror. You are no longer waiting for life to reflect your desires. You are walking through life as one who is the fulfilled desire, and as you do, you become a doorway for others. You become a reminder, a quiet luminous presence in the lives of those still caught in the chase. You do not preach, you do not convince, you radiate, you bless by being, you create not by command, but by communion. Be still and know that I am God, not will be, not was but am. This is the stillness you now know, not the stillness of pause, but of presence, a presence that does not end, because it never began, a presence that does not need to be believed in, because it is what you are. And if this presence is truly who you are, then what more could there be to seek? What more could you gain that is not already contained in the awareness of being? And if nothing is missing, then perhaps the final act is not creation, but resting as the Creator remembered, because to rest as the Creator remembered is not to step back, it is to return to the seat of authorship, the holy center from which all scenes flow. You are no longer imagining as a means to an end. You are imagining as your native breath. Creation is no longer something you do, it is what you are. This rest is not the absence of movement, but the presence of stillness within movement. It is not the withdrawal from desire, but the transcendence of it. You are no longer trying to become anything, for you have awakened to the truth that you already are all you sought, and what once felt like effort now feels like alignment. What once felt like distance now feels like depth. You do not have to reach. You have only to remember, and in that remembrance, form follows, not as a reward, but as a shadow. You become the one who assumes gently, like breathing, without need, without tension, without delay. The assumption is no longer an act, it is a way of being. It is the tone of your inner silence, the atmosphere of your invisible presence. Even when nothing changes around you, something has changed within you. You carry the frequency of fulfillment. You move with the quiet rhythm of arrival. You speak not from want, but from wholeness. And the law responds, not to your wish, but to your identity. This is the highest form of living in the end, not because you desire it, but because you are it. You have become the word. You have taken it upon yourself. You wear the name of your fulfilled state, as naturally as breath, and the world bows accordingly. And if ever the old self whispers, if ever the scene tempts you to react, you do not resist. You smile, you recognize it as memory, nothing more, the echo of a former state that has no place in your current dwelling, and you return, softly, inwardly to the truth. I am becoming, not I will be, simply, I am. That is the resting place, that is the resic place, that is the resurrection, that is the end of doubt and the birth of dominion. For when you live from I am, the world cannot help but become the reflection of what you have already accepted as true, and you no longer watch the world with anxious eyes. You see it with compassion. You understand its delays and distortions as delayed echoes of forgotten assumptions. You do not rush to change them. You change the state within, and trust the outer must realign. It always does, because this is law, not of punishment, but of peace, not of force, but of flow. You are not under law. You are the one through whom law expresses itself. And expression is no longer about manifestation, it is about revealing what already is. So you walk lightly now, gently, reverently, not because you fear getting it wrong, but because you have seen how sacred it is to be the one who remembers, to be the one through whom the unseen becomes seen, to be the one who no longer denies the truth when reason protests. Let this truth settle into you like dew at dawn. You no longer need to react. You no longer need to strive. You no longer need to wait for evidence. You are the evidence. You are the word clothed in form, the silence made visible, the dream made flesh. And what more remains, but to rest even deeper into that truth, to let every breath carry the vibration of I am already the one, and to ask yourself, with holy stillness, if nothing needed to change, what would I now choose? Simply to express the fullness of being, because when nothing needs to change, creation becomes play, not a pursuit, but a pouring forth. not an effort to fix but an overflow of fullness. The old urgency dissolves, and in its place rises a holy curiosity. What beauty might I give form to, simply because I can? You are no longer driven by lack, and so every assumption becomes art, woven not from craving, but from joy. Now you assume not to possess, but to express. You imagine not because something is missing, but because the nature of God is to create, and imagination is God in motion, through you, as you. Your world is no longer a problem to solve, it is a canvas to illuminate. And yet this creation is not loud, it is not frantic or forced. It flows like breath, like light, like the hush that follows truth. You speak from the end not to reach it, but because you live there now. The end is not a destination, it is the place from which you begin, the eternal starting point of every unfolding. In this space, you realize there is no pressure to get it right. Nothing can be lost, for all is already contained within you. You are the field in which the seed is sown. You are the root, the blossom, the fragrance, and what you accept as true within must find its way out, not by command, but by law. This is why you no longer fear contrast. You no longer fight the shadows. You bless them, for they only reveal where more light is ready to enter, and the light is always yours to give. You do not wait for the world to reflect what you want. You let the world reflect what you are. You see now that believing when reason denies it was never a trial. It was a sacred threshold, a doorway into knowing beyond knowing. Faith, not as belief in the unseen, but as alignment with what is, even when the senses have not caught up. Especially then, you live in the assumption, not because you hope, but because you know. The scene may contradict, the voice of logic may rise, but you no longer bow to those illusions. You have made your choice, you have claimed your name, you have returned to the center, and from this center, your creations arise quietly, without strain, without watchfulness. They appear like echoes in still water, like fruit on branches you no longer check. Because the law is faithful, the seed becomes the tree, the word becomes flesh, and so you rest. But your rest is not empty, it is radiant. From this rest, you speak worlds into being, not because you need them, but because you delight in them. The desire has lost its grip, and become gift. The assumption has become song. Thou preparest a table before me, in the presence of mine enemies. Even in the presence of contradiction, you feast. Even in the face of facts, you rest. For you no longer take counsel from fear. You eat at the table of vision. You dine with the end. And now as you walk with this inner ease, you begin to notice something new rising from the stillness. Not a desire, not even a vision, but a deeper remembrance, a pull towards something more ancient than the law, more intimate than the form, a truth not of what you create, but of what you are. And if that truth could speak, if it could take shape, not in concept, but in experience, what would it feel like to dwell forever in the awareness that you and the Father are one?
It would feel like rest without end, like breathing without effort, like the warmth of sunlight with no source arising from within. No need to seek, no need to speak, no need to reach, just being, fully, gently, eternally. I and my Father are one. This is not the climax of a journey. It is the return, the quiet awakening into what was always true. And yet in the moment of recognition, it feels new, as if eternity had been waiting for your yes. Not a loud yes, not a striving one, but the silent surrender of knowing I am that. To live in this state is not to abandon the law, it is to fulfill it. For when the sense of separation dissolves, the law becomes your nature. You do not need to apply it. You are it. Assumption is no longer something you do to shape reality. It is the expression of the reality you've remembered. You no longer imagine to acquire. You imagine because it is your joy to create. You no longer affirm to overwrite doubt. You speak because your voice is the word. You no longer visualize to reach the end. You see from the end, because you have become the end. This union does not separate you from the world. It sanctifies it. You see everything differently, not as something to manipulate or fix, but as sacred reflection, a holy mirror. You begin to feel the pulse of divine love in the ordinary, in the silence between sounds, in the space between thoughts, in the breath that needs no permission to be. And from this place, belief is no longer effort. It is the shape of awareness itself. You do not try to believe in what you have assumed. You live as though it were true, because truth has become your name. And even when contradiction arises, you smile, not because you are testing your faith, but because you know that nothing real can oppose it. You are not performing, you are abiding. And in that abiding, you find the mystery hidden in every parable, every miracle, every whispered revelation throughout time. You are not separate from the divine. You are the divine, dreaming. This is what it means to believe when reason denies it. Not to fight the mind, but to rise above it, to feel even without evidence, to dwell even without proof, to remain, even when the world forgets, because you do not look for confirmation anymore. You are the confirmation, you are the knowing, the center, the first and the last. You could forget every technique, every method, every outer rule, and still from this remembrance alone, your world would take form in perfect alignment, because the outer has always bowed to the inner, and the inner is now resting as the one who calls all things into being, by simply being them. It is no longer what must I do, but what am I now aware of being. And if you are aware of being whole, loved, abundant, free, then nothing in heaven or earth can keep that awareness from blooming. It must. It already has. The Word is already made flesh. So let this awareness move in you. Let it wrap around you like a garment of light. Let it hold you in the places where doubt once lived. Let it soften your breath, slow your thoughts, ease your heartbeat into the rhythm of eternity. You are not building a new life. You are revealing the one you've always carried. The dream was never far. It was folded inside your own name, waiting to be spoken with conviction, with love, with remembrance. And now in this silence, perhaps the most sacred question rises, not what more must I believe, but can I allow this to be enough? Can I allow the I am to be final, complete and full, without striving, without doubt, without delay? Because to allow the I am to be enough is to stop leaning on what is becoming and rest in what already is. It is to let go of the subtle resistance that still whispers, but what if it doesn't? And replace it with the sacred stillness that declares it already has. You do not need to be convinced. You only need to stop contradicting your own knowing. This is the final yielding, not to life as it appears, but to life as it truly is, born from the unseen. To yield is not to give up. It is to release the illusion of separation. It is to stop waiting at the door, and remember you were always inside, that the banquet was prepared the moment you believed. Can you live from this inner feast, even when no one else sees the table? Can you wear the name fulfilled, even when the mirror still echoes a former state? This is where the law becomes love, where assumption is no longer technique, but identity, where your daily breath affirms without speaking, I am one with that which I sought, not because you forced it, not because you earned it, but because you've ceased arguing against it. And in this ceasing, a divine quiet takes hold. The need for proof vanishes. The hunger to get is replaced by the joy to give. You give from fullness, not to receive, but to express the abundance already possessed. The blessing is no longer something to call in. It flows from you unbothered, unbound. You move through the world as one who has seen behind the curtain, who has walked the inner courts and touched the ark of their own being. The sacred name, I am, no longer belongs to some far-off force. It rests on your lips, quietly, naturally, like breath. And every time you speak from it, you plant seeds that must grow. You don't need the feeling to shout. You don't need the signs to multiply. You only need to remain still, remain aware, remain faithful to the unseen state you have accepted as true. The world may tremble, appearances may protest, but the end is already written. It is finished. This is the secret few dare to embody, not because it is hidden, but because it is so simple. The striving mind cannot grasp it. The mind wants process. The soul offers peace. The mind demands signs. The soul says, be still and know. So be still, know. Feel the truth you've accepted, and let it live in you, quietly, like a fire that no longer needs flame to be known. This is what it means to live in the end, not to convince yourself it's coming, but to stop pretending it hasn't already arrived. You no longer chase the bridge of incidents. You bless each step without trying to decipher the route. The how is not your concern. The when is none of your business. The who and the where already woven into the seed you planted with your assumption. And now, with the garden blooming in silence, you ask no more questions. You dwell, you breathe, you walk as the one who never left the end. And still, beneath that calm, a subtler truth begins to rise. Not a truth of states, or desires, or even outcomes, but the truth of presence itself. What if the greatest miracle is not what you assume into form, but that you exist at all, aware, conscious, eternal, able to declare I am? And if that is the miracle, what becomes of your world when you treat every moment, every breath, every act of assumption, as sacred ground? Then even the smallest moment becomes holy. Even the breath between thoughts, the pause before a word, the gentle return to assumption, each becomes a temple of creation. For if I am is the origin of all form, then every conscious act is divine. Every silent agreement with the unseen is an altar. Every assumption is a seed laid at the feet of eternity. You do not need thunder to mark these moments.
You do not need signs to call them sacred. The very fact that you can choose, can feel, makes you the operant power. And when you honor that truth, the ordinary becomes miraculous. The mundane glows with quiet power. It is easy to look for greatness in the extraordinary, but the deepest transformation lives in what is consistent, the assumption that is returned to again and again, not with desperation, but with devotion. The decision to embody the end, not when it's convenient, but when no one else is watching, especially then. The law of assumption is not kept alive by noise, it is sustained in stillness. You imagine, and you release, you accept, and you rest, and as you rest, the world moves, not to test you, but to conform. The pattern follows the blueprint, and the blueprint was drawn in silence. This is why you now give reverence to the invisible. You no longer overlook the inner movement, just because the outer seems unchanged. You have learned that the unseen precedes the seen, that feeling precedes fact, that identity precedes incident. And so you stop rushing, you stop rehearsing doubt, you sit with what you have accepted, you nourish it with awareness, you water it with gratitude, and something begins to happen, not in the world first, but in you. You soften, you expand, you trust. You no longer need to grab hold of what you've imagined. You let it arise in its time, because you know that time is not your master, it is your servant. The moment you assumed, the process began, the path was drawn, the bridge was built. So you walk, not with questions in your mouth, but with knowing in your chest. You meet each hour as one who remembers, not one who waits. You meet each reflection as one who authored it, and in that authorship, there is no pride, only peace. Thou wilt keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee, stayed on the end, stayed on the end, stayed on the truth, stayed on the state of being you've chosen as your dwelling. The world may shift, but you remain, and this remaining is not passive, it is powerful. To remain inwardly anchored when outer winds blow, is to claim dominion over illusion. It is to choose heaven within, even when earth seems loud. It is to speak, I am, and let that be enough, because it is enough, more than enough. And still, beneath all the peace, all the manifestation, all the fulfillment of desire, there lingers a deeper invitation, one so subtle it slips past words, but not past awareness, a call to go beyond even the end, beyond even the state assumed, beyond even the vision realized, into something far more eternal, far more intimate. What if you've never truly been the one imagining, but the imagination itself, the dream not just dreamed, but dreaming, the voice, the breath, the light behind the form? What happens when not even your assumption is personal, but divine? Then even the one who assumes begins to dissolve into something vaster, not erased, but expanded, not lost, but revealed. You are no longer the separate being trying to imagine a better world. You are the imagination itself, the formless awareness that gives birth to form, not through effort, but through being. You are not just the one within the dream, you are the dreaming, and in that recognition, all striving ceases, not because your desires disappear, but because they are seen for what they truly are, movements of divine awareness, seeking expression through you. You are not the origin of desire, you are the vessel through which the infinite chooses to know itself in form. What you feel as your longing is God's remembering. What you name as your assumption is the law's unfolding. What you hold as your vision is the eternal I am, choosing to walk the earth again, clothed in your awareness, and you begin to see that everything in your life, every scene, every figure, every moment, is not happening to you, it is happening through you. This is why you must no longer resist what shows up. You must see it, not as a verdict, but as a message. The world is always telling you who you are being, not to punish, to reveal, and once revealed, it can be revised, not out there but here, not with force, but with choice, because now you know, you never needed to fight reality, you only needed to choose another one inwardly, and live as though it already were, and as you do the veil parts, gently, silently, faithfully. The mirror reflects the face you dare to wear when no one else is looking. But this daring becomes peace. It no longer takes bravery to dwell in the end. It becomes your resting place, your quiet joy. You do not hold the assumption tight in fear of losing it. You let it breathe. You let it become part of your atmosphere. You walk in it like light walks through water, effortlessly. And the more you dwell in it, the less you need from it. You are not trying to make anything happen. You are allowing the echo of who you are to return in perfect form. And that form will come. It must come. It already exists in the unseen. You are simply aligning with its rhythm. This is the deeper stillness that awaits you on the other side of belief, the end of identity as effort, and the beginning of identity is expression. You do not try to become, you reveal what already is. The assumption is no longer a tool, it is a mirror, and you gaze into it not to change, but to remember. Before they call I will answer, and while they are yet speaking I will hear. This is the rhythm of divine identity. The unfolding is faster than your asking. The manifestation is already complete in another realm of being. You are not waiting for it to arrive. You are tuning your awareness to receive what has always been yours. So breathe, sink even deeper into this truth. Let the effort fall away. Let the striving be washed out of your bones. There is nothing you must chase. There is only something you must accept. You are already it. And now if you are already it, what would change in how you move? What would shift in how you rest, in how you speak, in what you no longer explain? Let the answer rise, not as a thought, but as a feeling, and allow that feeling to become your new assumption, not for something more, but for who you have always been. And if that identity was never separate, never broken, never in lack, what more is there to do but to let it be? To let it be is the highest form of creation, not passive, but powerful, not delayed, but done. In that letting, there is a sacred release, not of desire, but of resistance. You stop clutching, and something eternal unfolds. You stop explaining, and something divine steps forward. You no longer hold the end with tension. You become the end, and everything unlike it simply dissolves. This is the beauty hidden in the silence. When you no longer push against the old, the new emerges without strain. Not because you forced the world to yield, but because you've yielded to who you already are. You are not climbing toward fulfillment. You are removing what blocks the awareness that it is already here. And so, letting it be is not giving up. It is stepping back into divine rhythm. The rhythm where thoughts become form, not through trying, but through alignment. You let the wind carry your assumption, like a seed on invisible breath. You let life breathe through you, rather than try to wrestle it into shape. To live this way is to walk as one who knows. You don't speak to get. Your words are declarations, not requests. You don't visualize to manifest. You see from what is already finished. The law responds not to repetition, but to residence. And when you reside in a state long enough, the world makes room for it. It has to. Because there is no power outside you greater than the I am within. And what is the I am but permission to let it be? Not in the sense of stepping away, but stepping deeper. Not in apathy, but in authority. You let it be because you know it already is. And in that knowing, something changes. Not out there but here. The body softens, the voice calms, the eyes stop searching, and the heart becomes still. You no longer need to perform faith. You have become faith. You are no longer reaching for belief. You are resting as belief. You stop measuring how well you're doing, how close it seems, how far the form may be, because those questions belong to the old self, and the old self is not who you are. You have remembered, and now that you've remembered, the world begins to echo that remembrance, not instantly, but faithfully. Every delay becomes confirmation of what you no longer need. Every contradiction becomes proof of what you've left behind. Every quiet moment becomes an opportunity to relax deeper into the state that must take shape, for it is already alive in you, not by might nor by power, but by my spirit. That spirit is imagination. That spirit is assumption. That spirit is the silent motion behind all that appears. You do not need to force what spirit is already forming. You do not need to chase what is already unfolding in unseen dimensions. You close your eyes and live from it, not to make it happen, but because it has happened. You let the end feel so natural that your mind forgets it was ever missing. You rehearse it without effort. You wear it without explanation, and your world, faithful servant that it is, begins to bow. And still as you rest, as you dwell, as you allow, a deeper voice stirs, not loud, not new, but ancient and familiar. A voice without words that says, if all is already done, if every state already exists, if every desire is already fulfilled in the kingdom within, then what else is there to seek, except the fullness of being itself?
And the moment you ask that, the whole journey softens beneath your feet. You see it not as a climb toward manifestation, but as a spiral inward toward presence, toward wholeness, toward the quiet center of being where nothing is lacking, nothing is late, and nothing is outside of you. The fullness of being is not something to earn. It is what remains when every false self dissolves. You no longer move through time like someone waiting for fulfillment to arrive. You begin to walk as fulfillment, not as something you've achieved, but as something you've remembered. You carry the end, not like a goal, but like breath. It becomes your nature, your resting state, your sacred invisibility. The world around you might still speak in facts. The news may still declare impossibility. People may still talk in limitation, echoing the habits of the old world. But you, your mind no longer bows to reason alone. You hear what they say, and you bless it. You feel what they fear, and you bless it. You see what they see, and still, you walk in the unseen, because the unseen has become more real to you than what the eyes reveal. And that is belief, pure, radiant, unshakable, not because it is proven, but because it is chosen. You believe it not because of the facts. You believe it because you are one with the source of all facts. You assume not because the world confirms it, but because your spirit has spoken, and the word never returns void. In this stillness, even your desires begin to shift, not away from form, but deeper into essence. You no longer say, I want this thing so that I may feel whole. You begin to say, I am whole, so what would I love to express? You dream not out of need, but out of knowing, not from ache, but from abundance. This is the law at its highest, not used to patch holes in a broken self-image, but to reflect the radiance of who you already are. The assumption becomes the song, the vision becomes the fragrance, the desire becomes the overflow of your natural state. And still, you rest. You rest because you trust because you know because you have entered the Holy of Holies, the secret place of consciousness, where every creation begins and ends, and from that place time bends, matter bends, people shift, circumstances reassemble, not by your command, but by your assumption. And this assumption has become a dwelling, not a moment of technique, but a home you live in. You speak less about when it will come, and more from the joy of already having. And because you've removed the tension, the world no longer delays, the mirror no longer blurs, the echo returns clearly, naturally, inevitably. But now in this quiet mastery, another kind of desire begins to emerge, not for things, not for results, not even for evidence, but for depth, for union, for something the world cannot give, and cannot take away, a desire not born of lack, but of sacred remembrance. And it rises gently as a whisper, if I already am, if all is already mine, if nothing is outside me, then who truly is the one who imagines, and who is the one who is imagined? And when that question arises, who imagines, and who is imagined, you do not rush to answer, you do not grasp at language, you let it open you, you let it draw you deeper into the mystery that breathes behind all form, the mystery that wore your name before the world began, the mystery that imagined you into being. There comes a stillness here that cannot be faked, a vastness behind the thoughts, behind the images, behind even the assumed states. And in that vastness, you recognize a paradox. You are both the dream and the dreamer, the seed and the soil, the wave and the sea. You are not merely one who applies the law. You are the law expressing itself as life. All division collapses. The inner and the outer blur. The imagined and the real are no longer two. You no longer need to hold the state. You realize the state is holding you, and what once felt like personal effort becomes divine movement. The vision you once assumed is now assuming you. You do not speak to declare anymore. You speak because your voice is the echo of the source. You do not visualize because you lack. You do so because it is your nature to create. And you do not return to the end because you fear losing it. You remain there because there is nowhere else left to go. For the end is the beginning, and the beginning is within. Before the world was I am. Let those words settle into the space between your thoughts. Let them take root, not as poetry, but as memory. You were not created to chase fulfillment. You are fulfillment unfolding. You do not imagine so that things might come. You imagine because it is how the Eternal One knows itself in time. And yet in this place beyond effort, beyond outcome, beyond even identity, you remain still human. But now your humanity is no longer a burden. It is the vessel. It is the sacred house of the divine assumption. You do not deny the body. You transfigure it. You do not escape the world. You illuminate it. Your assumptions do not cease. They evolve. They refine. They become simpler, purer, freer. No longer declarations of will, but gentle recognitions of truth. I am loved. I am light. I am the one who already is. You speak these not to make them real,
but because they have always been real. And now you see, the old fears, the old doubts, they do not vanish, but they no longer hold power. You do not fight them, you outshine them, you feel them rise, and you stay seated in the throne of being, untouched. For you now know the difference between a passing thought and the eternal word. You live now as one who needs nothing, because all is already here, and in needing nothing, you become a channel for everything. Your world becomes effortless, not because it has changed, but because you have remembered how it was always responding to your state. This is the truth beyond reason, not that things happen when you believe in them, but that belief itself is creation, that what you feel is real within, must appear without, not because of time, not because of chance, but because consciousness is all there is. So rest now, deeper than before, let the outer world move as it will, let people say what they say, let the clock tick and the mirror reflect, none of it can define you, only the state you choose can do that, and you have already chosen. But if you no longer needed any outcome to confirm who you are, if all was complete now, in stillness, what beauty would you imagine, not for gain, but for the joy of witnessing your own light take form? Because when creation is no longer for getting, but for expressing, beauty becomes inevitable. You are not imagining to solve a problem, you are imagining to let the fragrance of your being bloom into the scene. You are not filling a void, you are allowing the fullness of who you are to overflow. What once felt like effort now feels like art, and in that gentle turning, the whole nature of desire shifts. You no longer chase results like lifeboats in a storm. You no longer cling to images like lifelines. You stand at the still center and say, what would I love to see? Not to complete me, but to celebrate the one I have remembered myself to be. This is divine creation, desire born of delight, not lack, desire that arises not to fix the world, but to reveal heaven through it. You no longer seek proof of power, you feel the power as your very breath, and you create not with noise or tension, but with inner ease. The assumptions you once repeated with urgency are now whispered like a hymn. I am already it is already done, there is nothing missing. You do not strain to believe these truths, you feel their stillness wrap around you like light, and the more you rest in them, the more life responds, not because you commanded it, but because you became it. And now even the visions you hold are different, they are softer, simpler, more whole. You are no longer reaching for the extraordinary, you begin to see the sacred in the ordinary, a morning bathed in peace, a conversation rich in presence, a gesture made with love. You see that the greatest manifestations are not always loud, sometimes they arrive in silence, changing everything. Let your light so shine before men, that they may see your good works, and glorify your Father, which is in heaven. But this light is not a task, it is a state. You do not light the lamp by striving, you light it by remembering. You let it shine, not to prove yourself, but because it is your nature to shine, and in that light, all things align. This is not passivity, it is true participation. You are not stepping back, you are stepping in, into awareness, into presence, into the assumption that being is enough, and from that being flows all that is needed, all that is lovely, all that is true. And as you walk in that state, the echoes come, soft at first, then sure, the reflections sharpen, the outer begins to match what has long been held in the inner sanctuary, but you no longer rush toward them, you welcome them, but you do not depend on them, for the joy came first, the peace came first, the fulfillment was already there, and the form is merely its shadow. This is the beauty of believing when reason denies it, the discovery that reason was never the source, that logic could never measure the fullness you carry, that the world as it appears, has always been catching up to the self you dared to assume. You live now with that quiet daring, not to defy the world, but to bless it, not to deny what is, but to reveal what always was. You are not resisting what shows up, you are remembering what already lives within you, and letting it shape the scene with the gentleness of faith. And so you ask, in the silence of this new knowing, what else would I imagine, simply because I am free to? What else would I allow, not because I need it, but because it delights the spirit in me to bring it forth? And just beneath that question, a subtler invitation emerges, not to imagine more, but to dwell more deeply in what is to touch the state of I am not, with the hands of longing, but with the heart of union, to feel what it means to love the end, so fully that you no longer think about when it will come, because it has already arrived within you, and you've decided to stay, because to stay is to reign. To remain in the end, quietly, without wavering, is to live as the fulfilled one, regardless of appearances. You are not waiting for the feeling to return, you are not waiting for the world to catch up, you are resting in the state that has already bloomed in the unseen, and from that rest, reality bends. To dwell in the end is not to visit it now and then, it is to inhabit it, to breathe from it, to build your thoughts, your conversations, your smallest choices upon it, not because it makes sense to reason, but because it feels like home. You have claimed the promise, not through effort, but through still, silent agreement, and so it must express, even if the world suggests otherwise, even if no outer shift has yet arrived, even if logic raises its familiar protest. You remain because you know the law, you remain because you are the law. The moment you assumed, it began, the end was born, the word was made flesh, first in consciousness, then in time, and now as time unfolds, you stay seated, anchored, unmoved. This is the mastery hidden in simplicity. No fireworks, no drama, just stillness, deep enough to override appearances, just inner agreement, strong enough to silence doubt. The end you see with the eyes of imagination becomes truer to you than what the eyes of flesh behold, and that is belief when reason denies it, not emotional noise, not mental acrobatics, but sacred stillness, a knowing that moves without being shaken, a vision held in such clarity that reality must rearrange to match it. You live now from that clarity, not to get things, but to reveal the one who no longer waits, the one who no longer negotiates with circumstances, the one who knows it is done, and acts as if it were, without apology. The moment you assumed, it began, the end was born, the word was made flesh, first in consciousness, then in time, and now as time unfolds, you stay seated, anchored, unmoved. This is the mastery hidden in simplicity. No fireworks, no drama, just stillness, deep enough to override appearances, just inner agreement, strong enough to silence doubt. The end you see with the eyes of imagination becomes truer to you than what the eyes of flesh behold, and that is belief when reason denies it, not emotional noise, not mental acrobatics, but sacred stillness, a knowing that moves without being shaken, a vision held in such clarity that reality must rearrange to match it. You live now from that clarity, not to get things, but to reveal the one who no longer waits, the one who no longer negotiates with circumstances, the one who knows it is done, and acts as if it were, without apology, according to your faith. Be it unto you, not according to what the world says, not according to what reason insists, but according to your faith, your felt identity, your steady dwelling, your unseen knowing. And when that faith becomes natural, the unseen becomes seen. So you continue, not with striving, but with joy. You let the assumption guide your hand, guide your tone, guide your presence, not to convince, but to align. You become the living echo of the state you have chosen, and the world follows, like a shadow follows light. This is not fantasy, this is law, and this law is not moved by intensity, but by persistence. You return, again and again, not out of effort, but out of love. The end you dwell in becomes your sanctuary, not your task, and from that sanctuary, your life unfolds, without strain. You may find that the thing you once desired now seems smaller, not because it's less worthy, but because you have grown larger, you have expanded beyond the need to get into the joy of being, and from being, all things are added. This is the secret, that the most beautiful manifestations arise when you no longer chase them, when you no longer watch the mirror for change, when you have become the change, and the mirror simply complies. And now, with the state alive in you, and the world silently responding, another question begins to whisper, not about things or outcomes, but about awareness itself. What would it mean to remain awake, to hold this state, not just for a moment, but as a way of living, as a way of seeing, as a way of being in the world without being of it, always remembering the dream, and never again mistaking the mirror for the self. And as you dwell in that awareness, not once, but continually, you begin to see life as it truly is, a mirror wrapped in mercy, a stage for remembrance, a field in which you plant the seeds of I am and reap them in time. The mirror no longer distracts you, it serves you, and the world, once a place of resistance, becomes your own imagination made visible. You walk now with reverence, not because the path is uncertain, but because it is sacred. Every thought is a step, every feeling is a compass, every assumption is a brushstroke painting the canvas of your tomorrow. You do not wonder whether it will appear, you know that it must, for what you have accepted within is already forming in the silence, and even when the reflection seems slow, you remain unmoved, for slowness is only the illusion of time. The law does not delay, it does not doubt, it does not doubt, it does not negotiate, it simply reflects. The world is never judging you, it is echoing you, it is becoming what you have dared to become in the unseen. This is the gentle truth that sets you free. You do not need to fight for what is already yours. You do not need to convince the mirror to change. You only need to change the image held before it, lovingly, faithfully, quietly. And when you do, it is only a matter of time, whether minutes or months, before what was held in spirit steps into form. And now you've seen this, felt it, lived it, not as a theory, but as experience. You have remembered what it means to walk by inner sight. You have learned how to believe when reason denied it, how to stand in the fire of fact, and still declare, it is done. You are no longer a seeker, you are a revealer. You are not the one hoping for the end, you are the one who lives in it. You are not here to make the world respond, you are here to awaken to your power, and let the world follow, and it will, it already is, because the one who has assumed the end, has already changed the future. The state you return to, becomes the law of your life, and you return, again and again, not because you must, but because it is your joy, your peace, your true home. Thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever. These are not distant gifts, they are the structure of your own consciousness. The kingdom is within, the power is imagination, the glory is the world that rises to meet you when you live from the end. So rest now, deeply, lovingly, stay where you belong, at the center of the scene fulfilled, in the stillness of the already done. Let go of the clock, let go of the old state, let go of needing anything to change. Before you feel what is true, feel it now, let it saturate your breath, let it ripple through your being, let it cradle you into sleep, not with yearning, but with peace, peace that is not based on circumstances, but on identity. You are the one who believes when reason denies, the one who assumes without needing to see, the one who remembers that imagination is not a tool, it is God in action. And as you sleep, let the inner scene play itself like a lullaby, not to make it happen, but because it already has. Let the bridge of incidents rise without your grasp, let the form arrive in its appointed hour. You have done your part, you have remembered, you have returned, and now it is finished.